All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Dispersing the Fog. This is episode 24. My name is Adam Rogers. I'm here with Paul Palango, August 17th, 2025. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm here again, another Sunday.
Yeah, we're we kept going right through the summer here, and with August shows, we're fairly new, so we wanted to keep it rolling. But also noticing there's still lots of people listening. People are interested in what's going on and following along. Uh, we had a good guest on last week, Paul, Professor Wayne McKay, and I had a nice message. We mentioned my former English teacher, Gordy Pellerin, who has written a book. Anyway, I got a message from Mr. Pellerin. He said 50 people got in touch with him to buy his book after after the show.
Really?
So there's lots of people listening and paying attention. So that seemed like a good thing.
It really is interesting to see that even in the heat of the summer, um, I get this sense that the people we want to hear what we're doing are listening.
Yeah.
I've been contacted this week by both municipal police and by our current and former RCMP. And I sent you one of the exchanges I had.
Yeah.
But they're all on side saying it's somebody is talking about what their issues are. The municipal police officer says, we listen every week. I could listen to you guys every day. I'm not sure what we would say every day. It get kind of redundant, but it's encouraging that they can see that we're here. We're not the bad guys in this. We're trying to get, hold people accountable.
Yeah. And it made me reflect too, if there's potential sponsors out there here, we've got product flying off the shelves and we just even just a two-paragraph mention of the guy. So
Did you see the story about podcasts fudging their numbers?
Oh
Like
yes. Yes.
podcasts and the Hollywood Reporter reporting on, they're not quite what they say they are, We are what we are. We're small and
Yeah.
we're not here trying to be make millions of dollars. We're just trying to do the right thing. That's the way I see it. I don't know
No,
about
that's it. It's public service, We're beholden to nobody, even if they do have delicious products that we already use. Uh, well, maybe no, no. So that's great. Lots of I'm hearing also actually, Paul, from police officers that are watching and paying attention to what we're talking about. So that's good. I mean, there's a broad audience, but you know, we straddle this line in a sense of being critical of the RCMP and its structure and some of the things that happen, but not we're kind of speaking for those who can't speak for themselves in some senses from the police perspective.
Well, it's very difficult because as we've talked about it before, the problem with policing is that in the policing politicians envisage all the police departments work together as partners. They're all like little companies, all working with each other.
Yeah,
But they can't say anything bad or disparaging about each other. And even in the Mounties, I mean, I was going through there's a case coming up in September in Nova Scotia where one of the Mounties involved in the mass casualty back in 2020. And I'm not going to say his name now because we've got to see how it works out, if it even happens, but has been brought up on misconduct charges and doing things that are detrimental to the RCMP, using government equipment, et cetera. This is going on in September. I'd like to cover it and see what happens because I think it's going to be very important. But looking at code of conduct, things that can cause a code of conduct hearing is if a Mountie says anything that is deemed to be negative about the force, they can be brought up on code of conduct hearing and lose their pensions, et cetera, et cetera. So that explains to you why nothing ever gets said. On the one hand, we have our, what we want to say, and we believe is true. On the other hand, there's our pension and our livelihood. So we're not going to say anything.
yeah,
And and then it goes back to municipal police. But what we're finding out now as we keep, heading down this road. I also contacted by RCMP people in the last little while who are laying out a trove of things we should be looking at. We're not a newspaper. We don't have the resources of the
Yeah.
CBC. You think somebody would be doing this? That's what they'd be doing in the old days. But now it's like, can you put that in a press release and tell us why you're doing those bad things? Oh, no, you're not. Okay, we can't cover it.
Yeah, it won't be part of the next paper. No, it'll be it's great, Paul, and so I think we are doing a service in that sense, specifically for the police, because as you say, their hands are tied in many ways. They need to work with other forces, so they can't be too publicly critical, and they have these code of conduct concerns always on the horizon. So, but we're going to see. We may yet have an active police officer of some standing join us on the show, and anyway, if they want to hold back a little bit, that's fine. We can speak for them, or
Well,
at least yeah.
next week we have a a very credible former officer who's still involved in policing duties, who wants to come on the show and talk about undercover work and informants and things like that, things that people don't really fully understand. And this is an extremely credible person. I don't want to say who it is, but we'll wait till next week if you join in. And it's sort of the trend of how things are working. More and more people are willing to talk to us openly about what's going on. And I look forward to next week for sure.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. Today's going to be a lot of fun because we have our good friend, the intrepid Chad Jones, citizen reporter, investigator, joining us a little later on too, with I think some interesting new angles to talk about. That's going to be Chad will be joining us in probably about 10 minutes or so. So that'll be great. Um, you were talking, Paul, about the being unable to speak, and some of the officers are unable to speak for themselves. There's another group. This was a story came out earlier this week. Another group that's not able to speak for themselves sometime are judges. And so what happens sometimes has happened this I guess, well, a little about a week and a half ago, I guess now. The Premier of Nova Scotia criticized the Court of Appeal for not answering the reference question about the Chignecto Isthmus, right? The Court of Appeal declined to answer the
Explain what the
question.
Chignecto Isthmus is to people.
Yeah, yeah. So this is the part that connects the rest of Canada to Nova Scotia. This is the area, I guess, at the border of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia that is a very low lying piece of land and is sort of at risk. Well, it's definitely at risk of being overrun. There's, train tracks, roads that are really low lying areas. And so there's a huge amount of money needed to pay for the repairs and the, building up of all of this infrastructure.
If the water gets higher, Nova Scotia's back to being an island.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's anyway, that doesn't seem like a good thing. So the question was, all right, who pays for this? Is this a provincial issue that Nova Scotia is, it's our problem, in a sense, and so is it our responsibility to pay, or is it interprovincial trade links and thus a federal issue under the Constitution? So the province of Nova Scotia asked the Court of Appeal to answer this question, and the Court of Appeal declined to answer the question, saying that this was a uh, political question, and so we're not going to answer it. And by the way, province, you haven't really done a good job of defining what you mean by the isthmus and the infrastructure and all of those things, right? So they just didn't answer it. So the premier was disappointed with that. Judges can't speak for themselves. They can't come out and say, "Listen, premier, your lawyers did a bad job of preparing this case, and that's why we didn't answer it," which was my observation. So instead, the Canadian Bar Association steps in and says, "Hey, Premier, don't be criticizing courts over decisions," and came out with a letter saying, "No, politicians essentially should not be criticizing the courts. I have some thoughts on this, Paul. What's your initial reaction to that story?
Well, it doesn't come as a surprise because, you look at the province of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and a lot of places in Canada, the people they put in charge of the, Attorney General's office are not normally the sharpest knives in the drawer. And it's like the premiers don't really care about the law. They just want things done in a nice, efficient way. Don't get in our hair. It comes to policing. Let's do the easiest thing. These all have long-term effects. And I mean, in Nova Scotia, the other thing about Nova Scotia, I know you're a lawyer, and I don't mean this about you, but it's notorious for being being run by in the back rooms and backroom decisions and everyone working together, judges, lawyers, police, whatever. And so the right thing often doesn't get done. The thing that's most political might get done, but in this case, they tried to do politics when they should be doing law, and they might well not have qualified people doing the law in Nova Scotia, and it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that's an issue. We talked about that before, but I have some sympathy for the premier in this case. I think, well, why didn't they answer the question? I mean, it really wasn't well put to them. Here was the dilemma that the it was clearly about who is going to pay for this $1 billion or whatever, hundreds of millions of dollars for this infrastructure. That's the only reason the province was bringing the case to the Court of Appeal. And then they get to the Court of Appeal, and the judges are like, "Hey, is this about the money?" And the lawyer's like, "Oh, no, no, no. This is just to establish the principle of the issue of who's responsible for these lands." Well, if you're responsible for the lands, then you're responsible for paying. It was such an obvious thing. I didn't understand why the lawyers didn't say it that way. And then for the court to say, "Hey, we're not going to answer political questions." Every reference to the Court of Appeal is a political question, or else they wouldn't be asking, right? So there's always going to be at least a political element to it, some maybe more so. But I thought they should have answered the question despite the flaws in the case as it was presented. So
Well,
anyway,
you think in this
we'll
day and
see.
age too, like with Canada under pressure from the United States and all the crap that's going on with the orange Cheeto down there. Um, you think Canada would be bending over backwards to strengthen the federation, to strengthen commercial relationships between provinces,
Yeah.
and to guarantee that things are going in the right direction and not quibbling about this or that. I mean, for those who don't know what the Chignecto Isthmus is, when you're driving from Sackville, New Brunswick, through Olac and over to Amherst, Nova Scotia, you'll see 15 um, windmills there, and that's where the Chignecto Isthmus is.
Yeah.
It used to be a big hay field where they exported hay around the world because it was some of the best hay in the world from the Tantramar Marsh.
Oh, yeah, I bet. Well,
So
yeah, now,
it's a boggy area that can get overrun. And you think it would be in the interest of Canada to have Nova Scotia not be an island?
yeah. Well, they have offered to pay half of the entire cost and have New Brunswick and Nova Scotia split the other half, but that wasn't. Nova Scotia said, "No, I'd rather if you paid the whole thing." But anyway, clearly that's not going to happen. So I guess they'll negotiate something now. By the way, everybody coming across the border knows not to import honeybees as well. That sign has been there for a long time.
The big sign.
Yeah. Yeah, some other I guess political slash legal stuff that came out this week, Paul. I noticed the federal conservatives are starting to go after immigrants in a sense. So there's a rule with if you are not a citizen, if you're a permanent resident, there's different rules about when you can, if you get convicted of a crime where the term of imprisonment is 2 years, there's certain rules on when you might get deported. So there's been cases where judges have taken that into account and said, oh, okay, well, I was going to sentence you to this, but if that means you get deported, well, maybe we'll argue that there should be a different sentence imposed. And it's it's something defense lawyers will bring up now and again. It's rare. There is a Supreme Court of Canada decision on this that talks about it. But anyway, the Conservatives came out this week and said Michelle Rempel-Garner announced that they're going to bring in legislation saying that judges shall not take into account any immigration considerations when sentencing individuals. So um, looks like that's going to be the attempt by the Conservatives to get a political issue with some legs in the fall.
I mean, it is a really tricky issue. I mean, the over immigration has caused problems here, there, and everywhere, but it's given it's given small businesses and other businesses workers because there are not enough workers,
Right.
but there's not enough housing offsetting it. And there is a tradition in Canadian law, recent tradition to go soft on everyone for one reason or another, whether they're, the color of their skin, their background, their gender, their age, whatever. And I think it's getting a certain constituency in the country more and more upset that things are, that the law isn't being enforced for reasons that are sort of contrary to what the law intends. I mean, am I wrong there, or is that
So
people are given passes that shouldn't be given passes? Another way
yeah,
that said it.
it's when I read Michelle Rempel-Garner's commentary on it, and it whenever you're talking about justice issues, there's always an anecdote that you can bring out to say, well, then it's not working because this person got out and then they committed another crime. Well, that happens, right? That's hard to defend against. But what the decision in the Supreme Court in FAM is the name of the case, the person was got 2 years in jail, right? So that removed all levels of appeal on immigration. Instead, and the immigration consequences had not been brought to the judge's attention at sentencing. So the Court of Appeal was asked to substitute a sentence of 2 years less a day. All right. So the Supreme Court of Canada said, yes, well, if it's still within the range, you can consider the immigration consequences in the sense that every sentence is supposed to have a denouncing effect, but also a rehabilitative effect. Well, immigration, if you're deported, is going to be more difficult to rehabilitate that person into society. So anyway, that's the reason of the Supreme Court. I think there's constituency out there that would say, well, if we can get rid of criminals under any guise, then sure, why not do it? I don't know. We'll see how the debate goes on that one.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the ongoing debate about the about youth crime and youth sentencing and stuff, where Canada still is, and we talked about this the other day about Canada wanting to ensure that youth are not treated as adults
Yeah,
and make it more and more difficult to prosecute them as adult, no matter how heinous the crimes might be. And in the States and in other places, they're looking the other way, saying, some of these kids are, 12, 14 years old now, committing murders and other things. Serious crimes are being drafted by criminal organizations to do this or are doing it on their own, because they were inspired by TikTok or whatever.
it's incredible, right? You see this place though, I guess trying to buck the trend as well. Paul in New Jersey. Is it
Yeah.
Gloucester? How do you say that?
Gloucester.
Gloucester. They if whenever a youth commits a crime, basically the parents are going to get a fine or some punishment as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because parents don't have control of their kids anymore. Not that they always did in the past, but the kids used to have. I saw an interesting article the other day about the loss of conscientiousness among younger groups. Conscientiousness being don't, to be moral, don't commit crimes, don't hurt people, etc. This is the moral fiber, your moral fiber, and that conscientiousness has been lost. But it doesn't seem to be in the Canadian court system. It doesn't seem to be a factor. Oh well, they had a poor upbringing, they had this, that. All kinds of people are brought up in poor upbringings. And some are brought up in rich upbringings, but it's how they're wired. And all kinds of people grow up with criminal parents and grow up to be police officers or scientists, because they go off on their own and make their own decisions. And we're coddling those who don't. And, there was a saying I saw the other day, I forget who says it. If you don't prosecute those who commit the crimes, well, the innocent are the victims then. The innocent members in society are the true victims
Oh,
because they're let back out on the street and they're committing the majority of the crimes.
yeah, and if there's no
Simple
consequence, then
logic,
that's yeah,
and we don't want to deal with it.
yeah, and if no consequence, then what's the disincentive to do it again, right? That's definitely out there.
And if you're dealing with people who have no conscientiousness, it does, okay, I'm going to commit this crime, I'm going to get off, and I'll be back to work all hunky dory. I'm going to miss a day. You know,
I'll be fascinated to see some of the if they get some reported cases out of this New Jersey situation where parents try to argue because now the parents will have to have lawyers and try to argue that it was their degree of oversight and supervision was at an appropriate level for their child who, listen, the kid was 15 and so it's going to be a complicated area, right? Because at what point is a child responsible for themselves? Well,
we had a case this week I know of where a 7-year-old boy was with their grandfather. You know how bad situation, it's the putative grandfather. I don't know if it's a blood grandfather, but it's the putative grandfather.
yeah.
And the parents went and found went to visit and pick up their kid, and the grandfather was teaching the kid how to start a piece of wood on fire at a time when we have a lockdown in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick and other places because it's a tinderbox and anything can be set on fire. And here's grandpa teaching the kid how to start a fire with wood outside. Like,
Oh man,
that's the kind of
amazing.
upbringing that, oh, well, it's the easy thing. I'm just teaching. It'd be a useful trick for him. He's 7.
Yeah. Guess what
You
he's going to do? First chance he gets.
Yeah,
That's up
that's
to,
right. And it's exactly on point what you're talking about.
yeah.
The role of parents and guardians to take care of their kids and instruct them on how to be civil and how to follow the law.
So much comes down, Paul, I mean, to the phones and not being face to face, right? And not having that personal interaction with people. I think it takes away a large skill set and that conscientiousness that goes with that. If you see the person, you're in their space, you're just going to have a different, I don't know, different impression of them. I guess that's why they're,
It gets back conscientiousness, gets back to what I said I learned at the Globe and Mail.
yeah.
Do anything you want,
Mm.
take anything you want, say anything you want, as long as you're happy about it being on the front page of the newspaper.
Yeah. Well,
It's sort of like, oh, that's a good guide. But
face to
nowadays,
face is
people do
important.
it, and then they complain that their privacy has been invaded after they got caught doing it.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
no, face to face, Paul, whether you're 7 years old, investigative journalist, or president, you gotta go face to face. I saw, by the way, speaking of the fire situation, did you see this Jeff Peverly, who's the PPC federal candidate in the last election out of Cape Breton? He
Yep.
deliberately has been fined the 25,000, well, it was 28,000 something, because it was 25,000 plus, court costs and tax. I don't know if there's taxes on that or not, but it turned out to a $28,000 ticket. So I'm sure he's going to be out there trying to raise money to get get some people to help him pay that fine off. But I think he's trying to get attention out of it as well. Maybe we shouldn't give it to him, but yeah,
Yeah,
deliberately walked into the woods, told DNR he was going to do it. Anyway,
I know the whole argument about his argument that Premier Houston is taking liberty with individual rights and is operating like a Nazi and doing all of these things. Well, if you look at other things he's doing, it sort of goes that way too. It's like the way he's dealing with the policing system, the justice system, the legislature, all of these things. They have a point. that he's not exactly the most open and democratic-minded premier we've seen in this province, and we've seen a few sort of autocratic type guys running the province. So they do have an argument
Yeah.
that he is being autocratic. But on the other side, you know, you if you scuff a rock by walking in the woods. Nowadays, you could start a fire. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Yeah, it's tough. Anyway, we had some rain this week, so maybe we'll get some more. We're getting a tropical storm, I think, soon, so
Yeah.
it'll all be in the past. Okay, Paul, we've got Chad Jones waiting to join us here, and looking forward to chatting with Chad. You want to bring him in?
Sure, bring him
All right,
in.
let's go. It's coming on the screen. Well, I'll catch up with Chad.
Chad Jones.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, Chad?
Hi, guys. Good evening. How are you?
Hey, good evening. Yeah, good to see
Okay,
you.
describe, Chad, what that thing is over your left shoulder. Is that a dobro or?
Yeah, that's actually my grandfather, God rest his soul's dobro that I inherited from him. It was custom made by, I believe, Earl Peebles from Antigonish area. And yeah, I was quite fond of it. And when he passed, being into the music as much as I am and a player, it made its way to my place.
So
So
what's the
there it
difference
hangs.
what's the difference between a dobro and a guitar?
Well, a dobro is, the strings are raised quite a bit higher. It's usually played with a steel slide and some finger picks, basically an acoustic lap steel, if you will. Um, I've never played one without the strings raised. I wouldn't know how they sound, but yeah, it's basically an acoustic lap steel. It's the best way I could describe it.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, we'll get you to play it next time.
Yeah, no.
I've used the glass slide before, but not a steel. Just glass on the regular guitar.
Yeah, I did have a glass one. I found it sort of heavy, and I've resorted to the plastic ones. I
Oh
find it
yeah.
pretty well.
He's not a purist, but that's all right.
So one of the reasons want to have Chad here for the audience is we're going back to the Nova Scotia massacres and staying on this story, even though it's over 5 years now, because we know there are some unfinished business there. Not the least being who killed Corie Ellison, and the fact that there's the DNA from two unknown males that was never identified. We have a situation now where the government, the police, the federal government, provincial government, the police, the Mass Casualty Commission have all aligned behind the official narrative. And we can show that the official narrative is not true, which means there's another truth out there. And Chad has a good sense of how this all links together. And I think we should just go back and revisit the story and show how the killing of Corie Ellison overlays everything that happened in the Nova Scotia massacres. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's potential for sure. Um,
Why don't
one,
we, who wants to take the lead and start off with? Let's go back to the night of and Corie Ellison is killed because we've had people in Tom Juby, who'll be coming back in a couple of weeks, did the forensics analysis of it and said he doesn't believe the story, that it doesn't work for him, and that it appears to him that Corie Ellison was shot from a distance, which suggests that the RCMP accidentally shot him. And why don't you pick it up from there?
yeah, sure. So, you know, the more we got into the Corey Ellison story, the more I asked myself questions about why were they so eager to execute Gabriel Wardman? You know, was it, as we said, an operation got bad? Was it a bit of both? Or quite plainly, did somebody from on, you know, a local detachment level or somebody from the area that was a member may have accidentally shot him? And we've never been given access to their WhatsApp messages, their private phone conversations that they're having between members. So quite possibly, I think there was probably a lot of communication going on between members, and that you know we never will or never could see. But something that struck me quite interesting was, you know, the first interviews given to Leon and Jodry were from Terry Brown and Dave Melanson. They're both out of the Colchester detachment. They both seem to be well liked by their colleagues. You know, did something happen in the night that was sort of passed around between members that were on duty, off duty, etc.? And, you know, things may not have been as they led on with Corie Ellison. So immediately I noticed, you know, once the interviews are taken and things start to ramp up again, you know, it seems like these guys they're almost on a hit team, right? So we've got the compromised authority that came in. We've all of a sudden got a shooting of Dave Gagnon at the Enfield Big Stop. These guys are running around in an unmarked Nissan Altima. And the next one that gets me again is the incident when they arrive in Elmsdale. So they're hunting, you know, they're going along with the team trying to hunt this guy down. You know, they come across the radio and, you know, say there's a man, you know, standing next to, I believe it was a white truck. You know, he's got a carbine out. He's, you know, he's got a vest on. We're going to take him out. So they're, and, you know, I don't know if they forgot that, you know, the radio communications that he was driving a white truck early in the morning had fallen, you know, out of mind. After you know, clearly you must have thought he was in a marked police car with what happened to Onslow Belmont, and basically come
Before
across.
you go any farther, before you get ahead of yourself here, like if you got a question, Adam?
Oh, just wanted to jump in. I think you mixed up, Chad, the Onslow Belmont Fire Hall with the big stop there
Yeah,
when you were talking about the shooting with Melanson and Brown. Yeah, but
Oh,
you're right though, right? They seem just eager to shoot and
right.
ask questions later on like two or three different occasions, right? Just jumping at the opportunity in a sense, you know, and maybe that's not inappropriate under the circumstances, but that was certainly the case.
Sure. Right. So that individual, you know, they've had him in their sights, and they say, you know, we're in Elmsdale now, and we're going to take this guy out. And, you know, thank God they come across the radio and say, don't do that. That's an HRP officer.
Yeah.
And it was Blaine Lane, who was from HRP. So, you know, that strikes me as extremely eager. Now, I can't help but notice that eagerness carries over all the way to Enfield. When you look at the manner in which they drove in, I believe they're around 60 kilometers an hour coming into the entrance, swinging around probably a good 3 to 4 feet from the pump. The pump is basically horizontal with the front of the backside door. So I'm not sure that pump would even reach if you were to get gas. Um, so, you know, my question was, there's there seems to be an awful eagerness, as you stated. Was that just heat of the moment? Was that, we can, or was that related to incidents that happened the night before? That, if this, I mean, basically, I'll come out and say he was executed. The matter of death was a homicide. Um, was there an eagerness to make sure that he couldn't give any information?
Yeah, well, what you're saying, the long and short of what you're saying is that the more you look at this, is that everything can be explained by the Corie Ellison shooting. The lack of the RCMP's unwillingness to send people into Portapic to discover the body, allowing the scene to be contaminated by people going back and forth, including their own tactical units, keeping others out of the loop all the way along, having people chase him but not block him off, not telling anyone in other forces what's going on. It's like they wanted to snuff out Wortman early on and make it go away. Because if they got to Enfield and arrested Wortman, well, one of the things would be at trial, he may well have said, I only killed 21
Didn't
or
kill that
20
guy.
people.
Yeah.
I didn't kill him. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so this is a way for the RCMP and the Mass Casualty Commission to do all the twists and turns and tying themselves in knots without dealing with what is obvious in front of us. I mean, it's speculation, but it's speculation based on the fact that the official narrative is false. And we know
Right.
that. So there's another truth.
The
And this is
official narrative is false. This explanation fits how we understand human nature, and it fits the rest of the known facts. So why not? It's in-depth speculation. It's not just
well, it's
I don't
based on
know it.
what's missing, as Chad said. We don't have record to Signal, WhatsApp, their private phones. That was all excluded. I've talked to people who heard the ERT uh, conversations on the way to the Enfield Big Stop. They knew who Wortman was, according to this person, even though they said they didn't know and they just happened to stumble upon him. So it looks like a duck, walks like a duck. I mean, we might as well call it a duck unless they can prove otherwise.
Right. I mean, it was only, I believe it was maybe 28 seconds from the time that Gabriel Wortman pulled into that pump to the time he was shot.
But only 5.5 seconds from the time they pulled into the pump till Wortman was shot.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not like, we just magically stumbled here. Maybe I
So,
don't buy it.
Chad, here's a question. I don't know. I don't think I've ever heard anyone ask. Did the officers actually fill up their tank with gas afterwards?
No, and no, or not that I could see. And I thought that would have been, I was thinking about it today, is, where's the evidence of when they filled up last, the
There's
distance
I think they're,
traveled?
I don't know if they're a
Did they
quarter tank
need,
or something.
right,
Yeah.
you know,
Anyway, maybe they
prove us
did.
Well, the
wrong.
other thing is
Prove us wrong.
I have a source from Halifax police who was there that day and arrived just after Wortman had been killed. And the Halifax detective said they all just disappeared. The Mounties just after Wortman was shot, they just poof were gone. And he said Halifax police had to take over the scene, interview witnesses, and do all of that stuff because the Mounties disappeared, which is very strange when you think about it in that circumstance.
Yeah, get everybody out of there. Get everybody's story straight. What are we going to tell people?
And one guy that was there right away was Mr. Campbell.
Who was the the superintendent, Darren Campbell, who was obviously
Over Chris
involved.
Leather.
Pardon?
Over Chris Leather,
Yeah.
but there was no sign of him, you know.
So essentially, you have their behavior throughout all this, and the government's behavior and the MCC's behavior forces us to stay on this story. I mean, the public is basically, oh, well, we had members of the public 2 months afterwards saying, oh, I'm tired of this story. And the media pretty well said they were tired of the story. But the fact is, we don't know who killed Corie Ellison. We don't know who the DNA is, the unknown males on Wortman's boots. There's a completely other story there, and we need that story told.
Chad, what do you think of that part of it, the DNA aspect of the Corie Ellison shooting?
Well, that's obviously a mess in itself. I, I know enough to know it stinks. Um, speaking of even the evidence from the Enfield Big Stop that was reported in April 2022 by the CBC, by the commission documents themselves, that for Matthew Bowes, the medical examiner who conducted the autopsy on Wortman, basically, if you read his, so CBC came out and, as a preamble, CBC came out with the Heidi Stevenson story and, basically said, according to the commission, it was basically proven that Heidi Stevenson shot Wortman and a piece of projectile was actually taken from his skull. That's what the media reported. That's what the commission reported. But if you actually look at Matthew Bose's report, where he's going through the wounds, his when asked about if they believe it could come from Heidi Stevenson's gun and could be related to the Cloverleaf Circle incident, he says, it's probable, given the theory of what happened at the Cloverleaf Circle is true. So had she had discharged her weapon and it clearly came in contact with something prior to, say it be a windshield, basically that's all they could really say was, glass, things like that. Well, we've looked at all the photos. There's no holes in the windshield, right? And from what I understood, there was absolutely no scientific evidence whatsoever that was tied back to her gun, things like that. But
none of the 27 witnesses there saw her get out of the car and get in.
Exactly. So
they were all.
And if you look at the forensic report, over 50% of it is pictures of projectiles that are unrecognizable, pieces of shrapnel that it doesn't really make any sense. So it's sort of like they said, well, here's all this info, don't go through it, but just take our word for it that, we even had the medical examiner say it's probable. If that had have happened, well, it didn't happen. So to me, that throws that right out the window.
Chad, as you're thinking about these kinds of things, and I know you're kind of relentless, or at least you're still on it. What kind of resources do you have? Like, are the mass casualty documents available, or what kind?
Absolutely. So that's it's all open source. So if you go through, if you find the mass casualty website, and there's the foundational documents, but there's the database that we really use was the record of all documents,
Do
right?
you?
You'll notice that they'll point to certain things that work for them,
Yeah.
documents when they're telling the story. But there's plenty of documents in there where, that's not true by their own admission.
Do you
So
have do you have tips for people? Because I know others and people listening to this will maybe want to do their own research or think about it a little bit. Do you have tips for people that are going through that database? I guess how best to search, how to find things that they don't want you to find, maybe?
yeah, well, it's not easy. Nothing is in order. I would say your best resource is to try and search keywords the best you can, to try to get a document related to a certain event that happened during the massacres. Um, but really, you've got to hone in on something first, I find, and then as you're looking for documentation and things to either disprove or prove or say you don't know, that's when you start to target those things. But no, there's really nothing easy about the way that they presented it. Most of the files, there's no sort of searchable text files themselves. They're all PDFs that were scanned in from photocopiers. So you've really got to have the
They
patience.
made it as
And
difficult as possible to track,
yes,
which again is a sign that they're hiding something,
no doubt.
But unfortunately, we can't get the media, such as it's organized nowadays, only wants to report what the government or the police say happened. I've written a book that's been out, what, 8, 9 weeks now, that lays it out for them and shows that the narrative is false. And has anyone said, hey, wait, that Plango guy and that Jones guy and that Rogers guy, they've proven that this is false. We should write a story about that.
Mm,
But to do that means they have to tell their readers and audience that they screwed up.
yeah,
And nobody wants to do that. So they say, we have we're authoritative. We have the story. We've triple checked it. We have 3 sources for every word that appears in our stories. But if it's all garbage, it doesn't mean anything.
that's right. And it's right there for you to see, right? We're only presenting their own lack of evidence or oh my god, um,
Uh,
oh
Well,
shoot,
sort of their lies of omission and obfuscation,
lies of omission, yeah, like contradictive
it's
evidence,
what's not there that's just as important as what's there.
exactly.
Chad, you had me
And
thinking you were part of the TikTok generation there. You couldn't remember something for a second. That's the problem with the story. It's not t TikTok friendly.
no, it's certainly not.
Yeah. It's podcast friendly though. It's a good podcast
Well, it's a great
topic, right?
opportunity for us to, keep bringing things up that we've been trying to get across to people for 5 years. And any platform, that leads somebody to do their own research. If you do your own research, you'll quickly find that the evidence is so contradictory, you won't even believe it yourself,
I'd be
right?
Well,
interested to hear.
the only thing that's true is 22 people died, and
Yeah,
it may be
That's right,
24, it may be more,
right.
but
curious
20
to hear
died.
theories on
Everything
the
else,
DNA, right? From Ellison. Just two missing male DNA sample or
Male
not missing
profiles, yeah.
samples, but unidentified. It's like, well, I'd be interested to hear some theories on that.
Well, and was any DNA taken from members to cross check?
Yeah.
I didn't see any evidence of that. Um,
and they
I'm
didn't
sure they
test,
could
they
explain
didn't
it away,
test,
but
and they didn't test their weapons.
Yeah.
nope.
Could get a warrant for DNA from the members, I'm sure, if people asked for it.
Well, I think it would be a due diligence for your members. You know, it would. We'd be able to say, well, wasn't us, wasn't our weapon. So it just makes me wonder. you know,
You
that
know,
should help you.
but
Um,
I think I could think of an argument for why a police officer's DNA should be part of the National Police Database. You know, if there's anyway a situation where there's a mixture like we're talking about, you should
right?
be able to quickly eliminate the police officers, you know, from
Exactly.
any further analysis, depending on the circumstances, or at
Yeah.
least be able to identify them.
You think governments, somebody in government or opposition or some politician or some citizens group would get involved in this and and promote the fact that, hey, we've got an unsolved murder here, probably by a cop. May have been an accidental shoot, likely it's an accidental shooting, but we need to find out what really happened. And
Right.
once you pull that thread, a whole bunch of other stuff will unravel, I suspect.
It's like LA
Exactly.
Confidential, you know, the internal affairs. If you were an ambitious officer and you're trying to get up the ranks, internal affairs is not a bad way to go. So, you know, get somebody in there that's ambitious and investigate this.
Well, and going back to Paul's point too, if Gabriel Wortman had have lived, and there was a criminal trial, um, geez, you would think the Crown would be awfully quick to, or I guess what I should say is the evidence they've presented, I don't think would hold up in court or even possibly be prosecutable. There's no there's no weapons test. There's no this, no that, right? And that very well could have happened when you right. So
Yeah, it would have been yeah, it
it
would
would
have
have had a lot
been
to chew on,
a lot,
right?
yeah, a lot to chew on, a difficult trial in that sense. Well, I don't know, difficult, but it would have been complicated from the
I think
Crown's perspective to try to
the
prove everything.
evidence may be lacking if they were to present what
And
we've seen in the commission report
But they
as
would
far
have
as
to because the Crown
exactly
the Crown could never make a plea deal where he only admitted to certain ones and not others. You know, it's not
right.
like Picton where there's some unknown bodies. The Robert Picton situation, he only, you know, they stopped at
Everybody's
a certain
known.
point because he was alive and there was going to be ongoing trials. They just stopped doing it. Here, they would have to, you know, you can't make a plea deal for 20, you know.
No, and had that case in itself gone to trial by itself, and the Crown said, "Here's what we have," and we saw what was in the commission.
Yeah.
I think they'd have a hard time prosecuting that case. I'm not a lawyer, right? But again, they didn't test anything. They let everybody go home, right? Very well could have happened if he was taken alive.
Well, lot to chew on there, Chad. We got a few minutes left. Anything else you guys want to cover? Anything we haven't gotten to? Paul?
I'd like going back to where we started earlier on. We talked about some of the people who have come forward in the last week, and I sent you the note about some of the RCMP stuff, which I think is really where we're going to be heading in the future. You think governments who are hiring the RCMP would be paying attention to this? But I got several messages from people talking about the current state of the RCMP. And these are RCMP telling me about 50% of federal positions, for example, have been turned into administrative positions. These people do not perform operational police work. They're just shuffling paper, building files, working behind the scenes. The unlimited sick leave that we've talked about in the past, which is basically people, Mounties being off for years, 7, 8 years, full pay, operating other jobs. And as this Mountie points out, they're operating other jobs, and the force says, well, that's good for their mental health. So they're getting full pay one end and operating a business on the other end. Um, One of the interesting things they talked about in one of the notes, and I want to follow up on this. I'm quoting from this: hundreds of RCMP officers of every rank take unmarked police cars home on a full-time basis. Some have even sold their own cars because they don't need the car. So the taxpayers are paying for them to go to and from work, and they're making 120,000 plus a year. Um, National security, for example, they can't get anyone to work national security because it's not a 9 to 5 job. And so they throw the car in to get people to work. This is the situation of our Mounties who are there to serve Canada. And it's just basically, as the words of my informant say, it's a Ponzi scheme. They're all in on it. This is outrageous. You think the media would be on this, but the media doesn't cover it.
Well, we're gonna keep on it, Paul, and you as well, Chad. You don't rest. You're working on these things in the summer and all times.
Sure. You know, anything to move the case forward, right? We're doing this for the general public.
Yeah, I mean
Absolutely.
we're doing it because we need an answer. This is conscientiousness that we talked about before.
Yeah.
We were all raised to be conscientious, to do the right thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're not in it for a buck.
No, that's great. So, Chad, want to thank you very much for coming on. Paul's given us a taste of
Thank you
what
both.
we'll be talking about next week as well, and so we want to thank everybody for watching and thanks for listening, Chad. We'll get you back on sometime soon to see where things stand at yeah, the next round.
One
Sounds good,
last,
gentlemen.
I've had a number of people this week and the past week approach me with their stories saying, I want to write a book about my life. And I have to point out to people that as interesting as your stories might be, they're usually magazine stories. Unfortunately, we don't even have magazines that do stuff this kind of story anymore. Like good stories are not just books. They're often good magazine pieces, 20,000 words, whatever.
Yeah.
Not a 150,000 word book. And I don't mean that to discourage you. I want to hear from people, but not every story is a book.
Hey, nothing wrong with magazines and short stories, Paul. It's beach season, you go to the beach. Maybe you want to read a novel, but maybe you just want to read
Maybe
for
you want
15 minutes and get a good magazine article or short story in. It's the perfect length for this season in Nova Scotia.
pick
So,
up a copy of Frank.
yeah,
Be
there you
great.
go. Good good articles in there. All right, that's enough for tonight, folks. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.